Hello, everybody. It's Suzanne Venker, and I'm so happy to be here with you. This is my first time ever doing Facebook Live. I am so new to it and a little nervous about it because I actually been putting this off for a while because to be perfectly frank with you, do not like looking into a camera to talk to people as opposed to, one-on-one. It's just a very awkward thing. And I've been doing it for years when I go on television here in St. Louis, and if I'm not in studio, then they hook me up to these, to all this contraption, and I'm looking at a camera, and it's just always uncomfortable for me. But anyway, I'm trying to get comfortable with it. So, hello, thanks for joining us. And the first thing I want to do is tell you all a little bit about what's been going on in the last 4 weeks since the Alpha Females Guide has been released. Those of you who've kept up might have seen me on Fox and Friends a few weeks ago. And if you did catch that, I actually have to tell you a little bit about this. It's kind of funny. So I was thrown a little bit on that interview because I wasn't expecting it to be a little hostile, which it was with the gal there whose name I've already forgotten because she was filling in for this lovely gal that I thought I was going to have. And you can tell, just a little behind the scenes information, you can kind of tell whether an interview is going to be friendly or hostile based on what's going on behind the scenes off camera before the camera goes on. So what you didn't see is that I got up and sat down and introduced myself to this gal, and she would not look at me. I mean, she was looking down at the paper and just was very nervous around me, and you could tell this was not going to go well. So that's what it looked like behind the scenes. And then the sad part is the interview, I thought the interview went fine, everything. She was contentious and arguing with me a little bit, but what was funny is at the end of that interview, they got slammed at Fox News on Facebook. I mean, slammed with how unhappy they were with the way the interview went, that they wanted to hear more about the book and couldn't because of the way that the interviewer handled it. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and I had to go through them all in the back in the green room and try to sift through it all. So that was kind of my, hello, here's my new book, and it's I guess a little controversial, but it's actually less so than my other books. I think it's definitely different in that well, first of all, it's personal. I think for those of you who I've already heard from and who know about the book, it's very much part memoir, part advice book, and so it's very different from my other books in that sense because it is very personal. But at any rate, so it's been a kind of a whirlwind 4 weeks. It went. Hit 22 on Amazon overall, which was better than any of my books I've done in the past. And I've already heard from folks from Italy, Africa, Australia. So it's really been very satisfying. And most importantly, I've been hearing from you all, which is why I do what I do. And what I'm excited about for this Facebook Live is that I can tell you what I see on my end that you're not going to be able to see when you just see a 5-minute clip of me on television, which is what's so frustrating for me because to be honest with you, I'll just tell you this right up front because you probably might find this surprising. I hate going on TV. I really hate it. I love radio because I get a lot of time, but I hate television because I go through all this rigmarole to get gussied up and flying up somewhere, or if I don't fly up somewhere, go down to some station here locally, and you go through all this for 2 minutes to say one thing, and then I'm gone. And all you do is know that the book is out, which is great, but it's not like this. So let me just tell you what it's like for me on my end after you've seen me for those few minutes on television. I get slammed with email. I mean, I get so much email that is so satisfying that I do not think I would continue with what I do without it. That is how meaningful it is to me. So I thank you very much for all the people who tell me your stories and who thank me profusely. I don't want to get emotional here because I probably will, because now you know why I really do what I do. But when I hear from people who tell me that I'm changing their relationships, it's enormously gratifying for me, and it's the reason why I do what I do. So I thank you very much, and this is my opportunity to tell you that. And so what we're going to do here for a little while is to read some of those questions and comments that I get that you don't have an opportunity to, without this to know about. So that's why we're here. And I have Sherry here with me, who you can't see, but she did the audio version for my book, which will come out sometime soon. I don't know how many of you use audiobooks, but at any rate, apparently a lot of people do. And she's a radio person here in St. Louis. That's where I am, by the way. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, in the Midwest. I'm a Midwestern gal, and she is going to ask some of the questions so that I can respond.
And we do have Facebook Live. Mike has asked the question, based on the book, would it be worthwhile for a man to read, or would that make my wife feel as if I'm assuming and defining her as a type versus having ups and downs translated into lessons learned together?
That is such a great question. Oh my gosh, thank you, Mike. Well, short of maybe putting some other kind of wrapping over the book while you read it. No, I would like to think, I would hope that, it really all depends on the type of person you're married to. If he or she is open to being not only self-reflective, but wanting very much to make your marriage better, then there shouldn't be any reason why you'd have to hide the book from her. It is certain. I have had a lot of men actually respond to it and read it themselves. And there's actually a book review done on Town Hall by John Nance, who is a husband and father, and he wrote a fabulous review. So you could check that out and see the book from a man's point of view. So the short answer to the question is no, it's not just for women. It's absolutely for husbands. I think the best thing to do, if you don't want her to read it, or if you're nervous about giving it to her, is to read it first. Maybe without her seeing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And then gently broach the topic in the best way that you can and hope that she's receptive.
All right, and then we have an email from Grace. She says, hello, Suzanne. I am an alpha wife. In fact, I'm so alpha, my husband of 35 years left me for a much younger woman. And she has started reading your book, and she sees herself in it. Do you have any advice on how she can maybe get her husband back? She says she was way too controlling and lost my soft feminine side. I'm working on me now, but I still love my husband and would give anything for a second chance with him. And now we also have another, a similar email as well from Helena. And she asked, what do you do when you've been behaving in this alpha manner with your significant other for so long that now he wants to end the relationship?
So those are difficult questions to hear, because the truth of the matter is, I think once a person in a relationship has checked out, it's going to be very difficult to get them back. And I think this is true for both men and women. And of course, the goal and the hope is to not let it get to that point, which is what the book is really about, is what can you do, when you've seen the signs that things aren't going well and you want to catch it before it gets to that point. So the long answer is, or the short answer, depending, I guess, is it depends on your particular situation and how bad things are. If he's already checked out and he's moved on with someone else, it's going to be a tough one. If he's still in the house and he's somewhat receptive, then I think there's definitely still a chance there to do the things that are in the book faithfully and hope that he gives you a second chance. The best scenario is that if that relationship doesn't work out, that you do implement these suggestions for your next relationship, so you know what to do right the next time. It's all trial and error with this stuff, and I'd love to be able to say I could save every marriage in the world, but that's not realistic. So that's a hard one.
And we also have a Facebook question here from Facebook Live from Lori. She says, rebellious women are impossible for a husband to change in our experiences. It must be the wife who wants to change and begin respecting her husband.
Yeah, I think so. Let me just back up a little bit for those of you who might still be wondering, what this book is about, because I feel like I didn't set that up very well, because I'm assuming that everybody knows, but that's not fair. So just a little background. So this book is really for women who struggle with letting go of control because they like to be in charge of things. They are micromanagers by nature, or however it came to be, nurture. And they are kind of naturally in boss mode. And, I talk so much about what that means as far as that it's not really that what you do during the day doesn't matter. So in other words, if you're a professional woman, you don't have kids, or you're a professional woman, you do have kids, um, you're used to being in charge in your day-to-day life. But if you happen to also be at home with the kids, that is just as much, this book is just as much for that group as the other, because in that role, you don't have any boss. And I know this from having been home for years, and I'm still the mom and the parent in charge at home now, but my kids are 17 and 14. But having been at home, I can say that, and having been employed, I can say that it's actually harder as a mom, I think, to switch into wife mode, because you literally don't have a boss when you're a mom at home, whereas a professional person probably has a boss. So my point being that if you're used to being in that mode, it's natural to then, when you switch over to the evenings and weekends and you're dealing with your marriage, to kind of stay in that mode. And this is a book about learning how to switch gears and not be the boss of your husband. That's effectively what it's about. And that too many relationships are experiencing this dynamic for a lot of reasons, which I get into in the book. And that ultimately men don't want a boss for a wife. That's just not what they signed up for. So I want to help marriages that are contentious as a result of this. My parents' marriage is personal for me. My parents' marriage was very high conflict. As a result of this, my mother was always in her alpha mode 100% of the time and wouldn't have known how to get out of it if you put it down on paper, like I did. She just wasn't very self-reflective. And so it was difficult for me. So this is something that has been very personal for me for a long time. And I know I'm not alone. I know that there are other people out there who had the same experience that I did, or they're products of divorce and they never saw a marriage that really worked and was happy and peaceful in action, and they want to know why. And so this is really about my journey and what I've learned, and what I want to share with other people. So going back to your question, I apologize. I just wanted to clarify that, because some people might have been confused about what the book was actually about. What was the last part of her question? Or she was just noticed.
It must be the wife who wants to change.
It must be the wife who wants to change. Yeah, it does. I mean, you can't. I mean, you have to get to a place. And one of the things I've always said is that this book is really not going to be. It works if you're in your 20s, but you're not going to be as receptive, in my opinion, and from my experience, in your 20s as you are in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. When you've been around a while, when you've been married a while, when you've seen how the real world is, as opposed to just your ideological view of how men and women are supposed to be. And once you get to that place, you're more amenable to wanting to, look inward and make some changes.
We also have an email from Craig in Oregon. He said, "Hi, Suzanne. I am an alpha man married to a very high alpha woman. Everywhere I go in life, I lead and am assertive, except in my 21-year marriage. Our relationship has been very difficult because we are both strong leaders, and I am convinced if she allows me to lead, even if it's only in a few areas like finances and sex, that we will finally have lasting peace and more depth of connection." So he also says his question to you is, can a woman who has been alpha in all of her relationships, both personal and professional, for 40 plus years really change?
There was a time when I probably thought no, but I now know unequivocally the answer is yes, that anybody can change. I have a whole section of the book where I talk about the brain and how we train. There's been so much brain research in the last 10 years about how we can train our brains to think and behave differently than it naturally wants to do. One of those, for example, and by the way, this is all precipitated by the fact that the person has to want to change in the first place. But the question is, can she? So let's just assume that the desire's there. And then the question is, how and can I? I talk in the book about how there was a time where I thought, why should I be the one to change? He married me. This is the way I am. This is obviously what you like. So come on, what am I supposed to do? And eventually I'm kind of embarrassed that I ever thought that way, to be honest with you, because I think it's a very young and childlike way of looking at relationships, because the reality is you aren't perfect the way you are, and anybody can make changes for the better if you want to. And so one of the things that I suggest in the book and that I did myself was to come up with a mantra that you repeat to yourself. You remember that book? Over and over again. So whatever it is you want to change, and I had a lot of things I wanted to change. Some things that they were related to my marriage, but they were really more about me as a person. And FYI, this book is so much about becoming a better person yourself, and then the result of that being a better marriage. It's really about taking the focus off your husband and putting it onto yourself and just taking ownership for becoming a better person. It's not always in relation to him. It's really more about that. And so one of the things I wanted to do, for example, was to start moving more slowly, because I move really fast. And my mother, when she was alive, used to tell me constantly for years, you just need to slow down. You just move too fast. It's not healthy. And she was really slow as a rule. But I'm like, beep, 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 going from one thing to the other. And it's not healthy. And you're not absorbing information as well as you should. And so I just wanted to better myself with that. So that's a long way of saying I would come up with a phrase like, I choose to slow down. I choose to slow down. And I'd repeat it, and you have to repeat it a lot. But there are a lot of times during the day, believe it or not, that you have moments, whether you're sitting in a car in traffic or you're in the bathroom doing your hair. There's just all these down moments where you can repeat this over and over. And the idea is that whatever it is you want to change, you repeat it so many times that eventually your brain readjusts itself and it becomes that thing. But it does take a lot of work, a lot of consistency. So that's something that I did over the course of maybe a year and a half, and came up with different things that I wanted to do to better myself. Another one was to not say anything, not talk so much, because I was trying to be more patient and just not talk every thought I had. So I would just say nothing, say nothing, say nothing. It's literally trying to get myself to think differently. And I had to tell myself what it is I wanted me to do to then make my brain naturally do that. And so today I'm a very different person, but to the point where I cringe when I think about the way I used to be. But it is something that takes time. That's a long answer for that, sorry.
And we do have one final email question. This is from Anonymous.
Okay.
I was hoping you could address a question I have been struggling with since I read your Respect is Key article. You wrote, at work, your husband gets respect without having to ask for it. He's counted on to get a job done and isn't necessarily told how to do it. This gave me great perspective. Now, what tools does a wife have to address her husband's failures to get the job done at home?
So, basically what I talk about in the book with respect to trying to get your husband to be more helpful, if that's what your goal is, or more useful on the home front, or whatever the word is I begin by telling you what I know for a fact does not work. And that is nagging, complaining, reminding, anything that is in any way, shape, or form motherly. Something that you would do with your child. Every single time you do that with your husband, you are further and further away from your ultimate goal. So the first thing you need to do is to recognize that what you're doing just flat out isn't working. So what are your alternatives? And I give a bunch of examples in the book. Just one is, for example, to kind of pretend like he's not there at all. More like he's a roommate. You wouldn't tell your roommate, presumably, what to do. So you might do, so let's say for 2 or 3 days, you say nothing, where you normally would be. And for 2 or 3 days, you literally say nothing and pay no attention whatsoever to what he is or isn't doing. It's like he's not even there. And then you do all the work yourself. It's just an experiment. So what happens is, in a case like that, is if you're not saying anything and he's used to your saying anything, he will notice that You will absolutely notice that because, first of all, it's quieter. Second of all, you're in the kitchen or wherever doing this thing, whatever it is, without asking him to do it. He is going to pick up on that because A, you're doing it all and he's not, and you're not complaining about it, so he's going to be aware of it more, and then presumably, if he's a good guy, feel kind of bad about that and step up to the plate more. So that's just an example of switching your tactics to see if, in fact, he's more responsive. And then also being kinder and sweeter and more service-oriented as a, again, opposite of the nag or the shrew. The more you do that, which it feels like you're sort of, it feels odd at first, almost wrong, like that's not the right way to do it. But the reality is he's going to respond to that and end up stepping up to the plate, which is ultimately what you want him to do. So it's almost like you're speaking his language and working with how he responds, then forcing your agenda or your style onto him, if that makes sense. So, I have a question for you all because I think we're going to wrap up right now with these questions, but I am considering whether or not to do this Facebook Live more steadily, whether it's once a week, once a month, or what have you, and I would love to hear from you all if you want to go to Suzanne@SuzanneVenker.com. And you can give suggestions for what you'd like to hear from me regarding the book. And I can even do it in a more broad context and talk about things related to writing, for example. So there are a lot of different ways that we could go about this. And this is just a test right now tonight. I'm just trying to try it on for size, see how it goes, and see how people respond to it. So I would love to hear from you. And then if in the meantime I have more that I want to share with you, such as the things that are going on behind the scenes that I can't convey very easily outside of this, I will then post that as well and let you know when we're going to do another Facebook Live. So it's if you want to tell your friends about it, it's Facebook. What is it? See, I'm still learning. Facebook.com/Suzanne Venker author is the link. So that's what you would send to your friends. Facebook.com/Suzanne Venker author. They literally just click and voila, there I am, ready to talk about whatever we want to talk about. So thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. I know it was short and sweet, but as I said, just a tester right now, and I'm open to ideas. So thanks for joining us.